you know what, we're going to still invest in education, because every dollar you put in education, that money is going to grow leaps and bounds more than if you don't invest in education. Now you're spending your money on what? Prisons?
Tulsa Talks is the podcast that is inspiring people to have everyday meaningful conversations to gain perspective and help the world.
We do appreciate you being on our Tulsa Talks podcast. The Complete Peace movement is geared toward helping people connect to themselves and their surroundings better.
I like that.
And we are currently building intentional relationships to be able to share different perspectives of life and how we can all know that we are one piece of the complete peace, and hopefully embrace what we've been created to do, know our purpose, and have a passion about that, so that we stay in our lanes and we function better with those people around us because we're not over in their lane.
I love that.
So that being said, your lane is political activist running for state Congress?
Actually, I'm a former teacher.
Okay.
And so I would say I'm a public school supporter. I'm not really an activist. As a former teacher, I'm more of I'm what we call in our Oklahoma house, I would be called reasonable, in that I focus on outcomes.
Okay.
I focus on how do we actually improve something.
Yeah.
I look at something and say, hey, we're not where we want to be. How can we set goals to be able to improve it? And then how do we get that to happen?
Yes.
How do we work together to solve a problem, as opposed to, blaming other people or saying it's somebody else's responsibility to do it? How do we help, fix it? So as a Tulsa school board member, I'm running for U.S. Congress.
Oh, U.S. Congress. Okay.
Yeah. It's about how do I help improve outcomes, whether it be for 34,000 Tulsa public school students or 700,000 Oklahomans in District 1. It's how do I listen and then go to work as a representative for those people.
Okay. Do you think that the people know best for themselves?
I feel like people know what their problems are. They know what they're dealing with. Like, I have an insurance business. I'm a small business owner now. I retired from teaching about 7 years ago. And every day I talk to people and, I'm on a fixed income. I don't have more than what I'm getting and my costs are going up. How can you help me? Right? And so we try to find ways to save them on insurance without, leaving them without coverage that they need to have. Working with people. I think what we have to do is listen to them. Like, what are your problems? And then it's up to the people that are in office to not make those problems worse. Right?
Maybe even improve them a little?
And try to improve the outcomes. So with TPS, I got on the board 5 years ago in 2020 during COVID. Middle of COVID is when I got elected,
Wow.
July of 2020.
What a challenging time that was for everybody.
For everybody.
Let alone the schools.
I mean, my son, he could not learn at home. Online learning is not what most kids can do. Not most families. There are a small number of people that that need that type of learning or that do homeschool, and I'm 100% for those people. But for the majority of kids that are in public schools, it doesn't work for the majority of families. And so, dealing with COVID, making sure it was safe, not knowing all the information, and just trying to get kids back in the classroom. And then at the same time, we were focused on, all right, outcomes in Tulsa Public Schools aren't what they need to be. So we went to the community and we said, what do you want our students to know? We just asked them open-ended questions. We came back as a board, we listened, we came up with 3 goals that have to do with improving reading proficiency for elementary, for middle school. So those are our first two goals. And then our third was college and career readiness for high school kids. How do we get them into tech? How do we get them into TCC? We've now got an associate's program where a kid graduates. We had 8 kids graduate this year with a TCC degree. An associate's degree is high school seniors.
Wow.
They're going to go to school now at OU, OSU, or wherever they are in the state, anywhere they want to go in the country, and they only have to pay for 2 years of education. That's $50,000, up to a couple $100,000 that we can save a family depending on where their kid wants to go to school for the next level, or they can go to work. They've already got an associate's. They can go right into the job market if that's what's best for them. So again, it's just finding solutions to the problems.
Yeah, I'm not as well versed as you are, but in the education realm by any means, stretch the imagination. But from what I understand, people can go to TCC, and it's paid for as long as they have certain grades in high school and they have certain grades in.
It's free, yeah. For if you live in Tulsa County and you meet the requirements, you can go for free.
But you fast-tracked these 3 individuals.
We're trying to get them, these 8, and we've expanded it now from McLean and Memorial to now we just added Rogers, and we're trying to expand it to all of our schools. Because again, just giving kids opportunities. We've added AP classes, IB at Booker T, as well as Tulsa Tech. I mean, if you can get certified as a hair tech, right, as a barber, as a HVAC repairman, while you're still in high school, those guys make,
reasonable money.
They make more money than I do, selling insurance, a lot of them. So, I mean, it is about, helping kids get to the best place for them, not telling them what they need to be.
Yeah, you said something about HVAC and that sort of trade school.
Yeah.
There's a fellow that people know on a national level that has a little company here in Broken Arrow named Mullins.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
He makes by all appearances, he makes a reasonable living.
Well, and I think he has sold.
Has he?
Yes.
Okay.
He's worth about 65, 66 million. Got a nice house down in West Palm, and he seems to be doing pretty well for himself. I don't have millions. I'm just a former teacher that's making it as a small business person. And I think it's kind of important that we have politicians that have real life experiences. Mullins obviously, owned a plumbing company.
Yeah, built it up to be a pretty good-sized company.
Kevin Hearn, who I'm running against, he owned McDonald's.
Yeah.
He's worth $100 million. The problem is that do we get to a point where we get all of this money, right, and we're not coming back and knocking doors and having town halls and listening to the people that live here? I think that's kind of the problem. I think it's also a problem with a lot of, whether it be Hearn or Mullins, a lot of the money that they get, only 2% of Hearn's money that he receives for his campaigns come from individuals paying $50, $100. The majority of the money, 98%, comes from either super PACs, so corporations giving him hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, or max donations from wealthy individuals. My donations are like $150, dollars average,
So how do you compete with,
in politics, I think it's about being
Kamala
strong
and
to the people.
Trump had 2 different amounts of money raised, tremendously different.
Yeah.
And
money doesn't win you elections.
Yeah, money cannot buy it.
It's important.
Yeah, to get your name out and let people know what your platform is.
Absolutely. You have to do the work. You have to have a professional campaign. You have to run for enough time to get people to know who you are. I do tell people, if you want to run for office, you don't have to have been in office before, but don't run for a major office like a Congress or governor unless you either have millions of dollars or you have been in office and you know how it works and you've built a name. For me, being on the school board for 5 years, I've built a strong name. I got 77% in my last school board election in Midtown Tulsa. And so I built a reputation of being reasonable, working hard, helping people. and because I was a teacher in the classroom at Edison, I understand, when we're talking about student outcomes and how to improve it, I know what that looks like in the classroom.
What do you think about, I don't know, did it even happen, the dismantling of the federal school system? Did that happen, or was that just up for vote where they were going to give it back to the states?
So that's the U.S. Department of Education.
Right, yes.
A lot of that has been stopped in the courts. We'll see how that plays out over time. Again, the only entity that can get rid of whether it be USAID, U.S. Department of Education, any of these things that have been money allocated by Congress is Congress. So the president can't just dissolve an agency and not spend the money because that's a congressional job. What I tell people is that right now Congress is not doing its job. Congress's job is to create the laws, to create the budget. The president can approve it or veto it, in the end, but it's their job to do it. It's their job is to declare war. They work with the commander-in-chief, the president, to make sure that we're making the right decisions because we didn't want a king. I was a history teacher. I have a political science degree from the University of Tulsa in secondary education and pre-law. What I learned very early on is, our Declaration of Independence was about we didn't want to be taxed by a king. We didn't want a king coming in here and putting people in jail without any reason or forcing people to join the military, shipping them off to the British Navy because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Those kind of things, Americans, we believe in personal liberty. And I believe in that. I believe that the government needs to do its job but not overstep those jobs.
So the U.S. Department of Education being dismantled, potentially, what do you think about that?
Yeah, my thought on it is that U.S. Department of Education, it oversees financial applications like FAFSA and all the student loans, okay, which is one part of it. The other part is they're there to fund Title IX, Title I, a lot of the things that help schools that are socioeconomically disadvantaged throughout the country. So like Tulsa Public Schools, we have many schools where our kids have free and reduced lunch. And so we get federal funding that helps those schools hire an additional teacher because they need more supports. It helps with maybe going on a field trip where Jinx, where I went to school, my parents could afford to write a check, send some cash so I could go on a field trip. Well, these kids, they can't. So this gives opportunities to kids having these Title I funds, and then those funds go to the states, and then the states allocate the money to schools.
Where does the money come from? So
the money comes from taxes that you and I pay, right? And so if we get rid of the Department of Education, here's the problem. Our state Department of Education had 36 deficiencies on their federal grants and funding.
What does that mean?
That means that they screwed up a lot. And if you get rid of the Department of Education, who holds them accountable for being deficient on where our federal dollars are being spent? Nobody. We're 49th in education. What I've seen is if the U.S. Department of Education is being used not just to do the things that it's already doing, but to actually fund ways to help school districts, not states, not this federal nebulous, like, where's the money going, but give money to local school districts to improve outcomes in those districts. With our COVID relief money, the ESSER dollars that came after COVID, we got money not just to put in new HVAC units, but to actually help improve outcomes from learning loss because kids were online learning. And there was kids that never went, out of school, that they had learning loss just like kids that were in school. There was just, it was a traumatic time, as we all try to forget, but it was especially for young people, especially if you're a kindergartner, first grader, second grader, and you're learning some of these essentials for the first time, and you miss that. those few years that now you've got to help rebuild. Well, we use those funds at TPS, and those have helped us to improve outcomes because we spent the money on summer programs, reading programs for all the students, not just the ones that were struggling, to help them move the needle. We used it to hire teachers, to support better outcomes for our students. And who made the decisions on how that money was being spent? The local district, where the parents get to choose your school board members and how that money's being spent, as opposed to myself or Kevin Hearn or whoever your congressman is. Do they know how best to spend the money in Tulsa Public Schools versus Stillwell versus Jinx versus Okfuskee? Each one of those communities is going to want to use it differently, right? And so I think we need to, because we've cut all those dollars off, and now schools are now losing funding from that, and they're having to make decisions where they were able to increase outcomes, and now they're going to have to find different ways to either fund those programs or cut programs so that they can keep the things that were working. And so I think if we can focus more federal dollars on actually improving education across America, because we've fallen behind. As the strongest country in the world, do we have the best education in the world?
Not by far.
When I talk to people, they say no. And in Oklahoma, we're 49th. So if we're cutting, again, funding from the federal government, that means because we're already $1,000 behind in funding versus every other state around us and per pupil spending, $1,000 per student. Less than Texas, New Mexico. And this isn't versus Massachusetts, which is number one, or New York or California, where they spend even more money. This is apples to apples. This is Arkansas, New Mexico, Colorado, Kansas, Texas.
Are we that less funded in our own state that we need the federal dollars?
Federal dollars make up 10%. If you cut 10% of budgets,
would that money not just stay in the state? And
like I said, if you just get rid of the Department of Education, and now they're just giving money to the states with no one to oversee it.
Yeah.
I'm about accountability. If there's no accountability for how the funds are spent, and we're 49th in education and getting worse, guess what we were ranked in 2011 in education in Oklahoma?
Yeah, I have no idea.
17th.
Wow.
I came back to Oklahoma after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. And the reason I came back is I wanted to raise my son or daughter. I didn't have a kid at that point, but I wanted to be able to raise them in Oklahoma because I went to Jinx and I got a great education. Although we didn't spend a lot of money on education, we were hitting way above our weight because we had House Bill 1017. It lowered class sizes. It made sure that we were spending the money where we needed to spend it. Well, from the time I came back, and the reason I ran for as a Republican for House District 67 in 2016, when Mary Fallin was the governor, I ran for office because we weren't paying teachers. We weren't funding schools enough because we had after 2008, we had a whole bunch of cuts. After that housing market crash, we had instability in the state. And so instead of saying, you know what, we're going to still invest in education because every dollar you put in education, that money is going to grow leaps and bounds more than if you don't invest in education. Now you're spending your money on what? Prisons, on worse healthcare outcomes, on trying to get companies to come here and give them $100 million, and then they say, they got better schools in Austin. They got better schools in Kansas City, right? So I always say, invest in the things that you believe in. I believe in our kids. And I think with the Department of Education, whether it be the U.S. or Oklahoma Department of Education, we need to fund them. We need to hold them accountable to improve outcomes, right? So you can't just do one and not do the other. But those are things that are going to pay off dividends if you invest. I always hear from people, hey, John, well, at least there's Mississippi, right? Guess what Mississippi is ranked in education right now?
I don't know.
26th.
So they took leaps and bounds upward.
They were 50th for the majority of the time I was in the classroom. a few years ago, and they're a predominantly Republican state like us. Again, poverty levels, very similar. They decided we're going to do something about this, and their legislature, their schools, their businesses all came together, and they came up with a plan to help improve outcomes, and they started with reading proficiency. That's what we have to do. And I hear Ryan Walters, when I talk to him in person, that's what he talks about.
But nobody's reading now. We're all watching video, looking at pictures. Look at the websites.
Yeah.
See what's on the website. See what's hitting on social media. It's not reading.
Well, and
is reading still a value for this generation?
It has to be. We still have to, and with AI and all the things that are coming out, we have to still be able to read, because no matter what jobs we're going into, we've got to be able to understand what we're doing at a higher level.
Is video not taking care of this for us?
No. No, it is not. And to be honest, there's a reason why the state just passed a law banning cell phones in classrooms for the next year. I wasn't for that, because Tulsa Public Schools had already banned cell phones in the classroom. We had something that worked for our district. I'm more of a local control person. I don't like the state or even the federal government trying to micromanage. I'm more of a,
But a broad stroke of
if kids are on their phones, they're not learning.
Yeah, broad stroke of accountability is
correct.
Good, but micromanaging is bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm not saying that this can be good or not, because in a year, every district can come back up with whatever plan they want based on this new law, and they could go back to allowing cell phones or not. But I do think they're going to find that not having cell phones in the classroom is going to lead to better outcomes.
Yeah, so this is just like a beta test or whatever, just a one-year test?
A bit. But again, many school districts already have started implementing this ban.
What's the problem with phones in classrooms?
Kids are more worried about Angry Birds and their Facebook than, and it's mainly video games for a lot of the kids, or YouTube or TikTok, instead of doing their lesson.
Yeah.
Or like my son, he'll get his lesson done in 10 or 15 minutes because he can do it quickly, but it's not done maybe as accurately as it should be. And I mean, when I was growing up in the 90s, in the 80s, we did the same things, right? But we didn't have a cell phone, and your teacher didn't allow you to play the Super Nintendo in the back of the classroom, if you finished with your math assignment.
Has there been any experiments with engaging people with cell phones or engaging students with cell phones as a learning tool?
Absolutely.
And that's been
well, and I
that's
think
a failure?
That's generally done at the high school level. But remember, not every kid has a cell phone. Many do, but not everyone. So I think, again, teaching technology, teaching kids how to use social media. I'm a big proponent of personal financial literacy, understanding insurance and banking and how to rent an apartment, how to buy a car, what credit card debt can do for you. I think by giving kids the tools they need, when I ask kids, what do you want to know? They want to know these skills. I mean, cybersecurity is one of the biggest degrees now at the University of Tulsa. That wasn't a degree when I went there in the 90s, right?
Sure.
So I think we have to adapt and use technology. And we are using technology, but it's focused on the educational aspects of things, and not just if you've got your cell phone, you have access to anything. And so that's where I think, making sure that kids, the time that they're trying, that we need them to learn is actually focused on learning. And then when the time to go home and relax and do the other things, that's when we can pull out those phones and do other stuff.
I'm not a tech guy, but I know that people are somewhat addicted to seeing their phones.
Yeah.
And I suppose an argument and the counterweight to it is, could we use technology to allow children or students to continue engaging as they want to engage, but limiting the functionality of those phones while they're at school?
what they do is a lot of teachers use certain apps, or they'll use like QR codes, where I know teachers that have done a great job implementing cell phones in the classroom. If you don't have a cell phone, then they've got a Chromebook or something else that they can use similar. Again, when you ban everything, when you do blanket things, that takes away from that teacher's opportunity to be able to utilize that tool. That's where I think it's kind of local districts can come up with a little bit better solution based on what their teachers are doing.
If you're on an app, is it possible to block all other incoming information from those?
They can block through our Wi-Fi system. We're able to block content.
Okay.
To keep it educationally focused.
Yeah, so that is an option, but that's not an option.
Kids can also use cellular, to be able to access things that's not on Wi-Fi. I mean, so again, there are all the smart kid
workarounds.
The smart kid can always find a way to work around it, and that's kind of the issue. Is that we want kids to focus on the thing that's important.
Yeah.
That their parents sent them to school to do. I'm pretty sure most parents didn't send their kids to school to, play video games on their cell phones.
Yeah, my daughter is a pre-K teacher at Kendall Whittier, right there by TU. And
great school.
And her passion is to help children learn to love learning. And her students get a little bit beside themselves when Miss Lightfoot gives them a day off from learning just for a fun day. And that is a great testament to me to know that kids can learn to love learning. The challenge with Kendall Whittier is there are a lot of single parent homes.
Yeah. In a lot of Tulsa public schools, we have quite a few kids that have that.
There's a lot of poverty.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of parents that are not engaged trying to help their children learn. They're not encouraging.
Yeah, about 80% of our kids are socioeconomically disadvantaged.
You find that demographic has a difference in the focus on learning?
Well, and I think there are a lot of different layers.
Sure. Everybody's an individual.
38% of our kids come from a multilingual household where the parents may not speak English too.
A lot of Alexis's students don't speak very good English, if any.
But we have programs that help those kids. If they stay within our ESL program for 5 years, many of them speak better and read better than students that have always had English in their life. So I think what it is it's about making sure that we help parents where they're at, that we support the parents and see them.
But they're disengaged.
And the trouble they have. And then what Kendall Whittier does, and this is what a lot of schools that I see successfully doing, is that they also have outreach within the school to help the whole community. Schools are usually the only part of government that is in your neighborhood, that is closest to your house. And so what I see schools that are successful in socioeconomically disadvantaged areas, which Tulsa, a lot of Tulsa public schools has those. Yeah, absolutely. And so when we have all of that, and we see it in rural communities as well, but when you give access to families at schools to, a healthcare opportunity or a housing opportunity, when you're giving them access to the whole family, because if they come to school hungry, it's going to be pretty hard to learn. So we offer free breakfast and lunch to every kid in the school system.
Yeah. Nutrition has a huge impact on development.
Yeah, and there's some kids that we can send home with food, because the only meals they're getting sometimes are from schools, and if anything, it cuts down on parents' responsibility so that they can provide the other essential needs. But when you've got domestic violence within the community, when you've got drug use and people coming that are incarcerated, that they're coming with a lot of these traumas, a lot of these different issues, we have to teach every one of those kids Every single one of those kids deserves the opportunity to get a great education.
And how focused can they be in school, or how do you help them become more focused in school with those challenges in their life?
Yeah, is that you have to recognize them, number one, and then number two, you've got to hold them accountable to actually keep learning, and at the same time helping get the family the resources that they need that are already accessible within the community. So it means that schools can't just do this by themselves. What I tell people is that if we really want Oklahoma to be successful, our school system needs to be working with our city. Our city needs to be working with our state. The state needs to be working with the federal government, all on the same page. And then we also need to be working with the tribal governments that are here that want to help not just tribal members, but all parts of Northeast Oklahoma, as well as the nonprofits. In fact, in Tulsa, and a lot of people don't know this, we spend more money per year in nonprofit funding than our entire city budget through the Tulsa Foundation. We are the second largest foundation in the entire country. We are the largest by far per capita, because the largest is Silicon Valley, which is, San Francisco, San Jose.
Yeah, big money.
Big money. A lot more people there. We are the givingest city probably in the entire world. And we can see that with the Gathering Place. There's certain things we can see it in, but it's not just George Kaiser. It's not just the Helmrichs or all of these great families that have given back in Tulsa. It's a lot of Tulsans like you and me. Yeah. That support DVIS, or they support breast cancer, or all these different things. And we also give to people in other parts of the world. I mean, I'm in Rotary. In Rotary, we help Celia Clinton here, and we do Shop with a Cop with the Tulsa Police Department, and help kids, buy presents for their family for Christmas. But we also are helping build water wells in Nicaragua, right? Help end polio with vaccinations in Africa and in Asia. So, we can have an impact when we come together, and if that's a core belief of what we are. And so I believe if you get all of these organizations on the same page, and I don't believe they're doing that right now. I don't believe, that our federal delegation is really working with our city the best that it could, with all of our local communities. Right now, there's a big division between the state and the tribes, right? If we are actually working together, and what I tell people is look at the Thunder. I'm a coach, so I love seeing coaches and teams that are successful, that do it with teamwork. And they always say, we do it one day at a time. We're going back to zero. So it doesn't matter what we won or lost today. We're going back to zero, and we're going to win the off days. We're gonna make sure that every time there's a play, whether it's a good one or a bad one, we're ready for the next play. That's what you have to do to build a team, and you have to get everybody working together. And yeah, we see that in sports, but I think that's something that we've got to learn as a country.
How do we build our winning team, city by city, state by state,
without being divisive, without blaming, like, oh, this is the state's fault. Oh, this is Ryan Walters' fault, or oh, this is the Democrats' fault or the Republicans. No, this is how do we work together to have better outcomes. That's, as a teacher, that's what I'm about, because when I walk into a classroom, I don't get to choose any of those students. Yeah. And every single one of those students comes to me with a different level. I was a geography teacher, so some of them had great experiences, understood the world around them. Many of them have never been out of Tulsa. My job was to make every one of them better today, a little bit more, at the end of the week a little bit better, at the end of the year a little bit better. And if you can improve just on a day-to-day and work together and make sure you're helping every single one of those kids or every one of the citizens, then I feel like you can move the needle and you can have success.
Yeah. With proper core curriculum and opportunities for people to choose their life path, how do you guys help people choose a life path as an educator? Yeah,
so that's one of the things that we had a lot of feedback from the community is don't just college is the only solution. That's just not feasible for a lot of our students. But
it doesn't fit them.
It doesn't fit them, but also don't tell kids that college isn't possible either.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it's seeing, right, man, you're really good at drawing. You should be an artist. I bet you would be great as a graphic artist or as an architect. Look at those drawings. I mean,
you guys have a great tool for your students.
And so with our college and career readiness goal that we have, we've created, advisories and plans so that every counselor now is focused on working with individual students to find what the best path for them is. It's also to try to engage students to try to push themselves, right? Not just to take the minimum, but hey, you're really good at this. Let's try to get you into an AP class because you like history. Or, even though that may be your only AP class, let's try to push you because that's where your strength is. Or maybe it's, hey, they're into athletics. Hey, wouldn't you like to be a trainer, right? Learn how to tape ankles. You can help other kids that, when they get injured, but just finding things that are important to them and then pushing them towards tech, pushing them towards TCC, pushing them towards things that are going to help them to set a goal for where they're going to be. That doesn't mean that it won't change.
Do you guys have a system to do that?
Yeah. So we use, through our advisories, we are able to work with kids to find ways to help them find what it is that their aptitude is. It's a little bit more complex than like the old aptitude tests. You're going to be a firefighter, you're going to be a carpenter, but it's finding, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what are their likes and dislikes, and then how do we help them achieve that, and then setting a plan for them. And again, counselors aren't teaching kids every day, but their role in helping make sure that, number one, kids are meeting the goals that they need and getting the classes passed that they need to graduate, but also how do we help them get where they want to go after graduation? And I think that's where, we saw we could do better, and we're making some strides to improve on that now at TPS.
So is this life path or career path awareness core curriculum?
No.
Could it be?
Yeah, I think there are things that we need to add to the core curriculum, like financial literacy, that I think are essential that every kid should know, and that they're not. You don't think
that they should have a self-awareness path core curriculum to engage their self in discovering who they are?
Yeah, no, I think there's a way to do it. I don't know if it's an individual class, right, or if you are creating like our advisory model. There's a lot of different ways to do it where it's not an every day a week type of situation, but I think there's opportunities to do that. And I think if you're not focused on it, yeah.
How many advisors do you have per student?
So an advisory class, every kid would go to a class, and usually they're once a week. And you would have 20 to 30 students in that class because every teacher would have an advisory class, and they may be students that they know or they don't know. At TPS, I believe, at Edison, we would keep them the same group throughout high school so that you actually get to know them and see how they're doing and help them academically. What are some issues you're struggling with? Are we on path to graduate? Where are you wanting to go?
And is this curriculum based, or is this just pulling something out of the air?
No, it's all scientifically based using data. These are things that, again, are being done in many schools across the country. It's just finding the right programs, finding the thing that works in your district. I don't think there's one curriculum, for instance, that is just a magic, thing that's going to fix everything.
But TPS does have a curriculum.
Yeah, we do have a way to help kids' needs and finding their path and getting them better prepared, and we're monitoring that.
We did not do that when I was in high school. Yeah. We did not have a career path class while I was in high school. Did you guys?
No. And, I think at Jinx, there was definitely a push for, as many kids to go to college as possible. But again, we didn't have the challenges, because it was a suburban school. We didn't have the socioeconomic issues. So there was more expectation of college as opposed to, looking at a more diverse group of students that are going to have a more diverse opportunity in career paths. But I still think, any kid that comes into a school, if they want to go to college, there's a way for us to get them there. If that's the path that they want. If there's another path that they want to take, I feel like it's up to schools to help them get there and not to tell you have to do this, as opposed to let's find a way to help you be the best Craig or the best John that you can be.
So, John, you are an educational focused person of helping people live better lives through being developed into who they should be?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate statement.
And you want to help the state at the federal level to have a voice and a good overview from a federal level?
Yeah. And to know that, no matter what party you're in or what your situation is, that you have somebody that will listen. We can't, as politicians, you can't always do exactly what every constituent wants. I was told when I was running for school board, why would you want to do that? You don't get paid anything, and you're always going to make half the people angry. Yeah. Because whatever decision you make is going to be the wrong decision for half the people. But, I said, it wasn't, when I was telling, this was the Tulsa World, I was telling, when they asked me that question, I'm like, well, that's not why I'm running. I'm running to help students. And if I have to make tough decisions, then I'm going to make it listening to my constituents and then trying to make the best decision for students. And that's what every time I make a decision, that's what I ask myself, is this good for students? And in Congress, I would ask the same thing. Is this good for Oklahomans? Is this good for the constituents that I represent or not? And if it's not, then why are we doing it?
Do you think that it's possible to craft things, bills, laws, ways of living that would be more like an 80-20 rule, where you could craft it in a way that 80% of the people would actually want it?
I think that's difficult to always, what I see in government, and I think that the governments and the governing bodies that work the best are not the ones that one side or the other side gets its way. If 80%,
why does it have to be one side or the other instead of a oneness?
Why can't we all be working for the same thing? My problem is that with the political spectrum we have now, we've got, half the people want one thing and half the people want the other thing.
Are you sure that's what they want?
But they're most of the time they want the same thing. They're just disagreeing on how to get there. And so my thing is that I believe we would be better off if we said, all right, what are the things we can agree on? They're the outcomes we want. If we want to save, let's say Medicare. Let's say Medicare is important and we want to make sure we have it. Or Social Security is important for people that are retiring. We need to make sure it's still there. Then why aren't we sitting down as a Congress and saying, how do we fix this? And we do it in a way that if one political party or the other political party doesn't agree with it, if we're only choosing the side that has 51% majority, right, that at that time, I don't know if we're getting the best plan. And I don't know if it's strategic, and that are we really looking at what's going to get the best outcome in the end, as opposed to, all right, why don't we sit down and work out everything together? I think there are many times in our Oklahoma legislature where we pass things almost 99-1. There are, in fact, Governor Stitt was complaining this year because about 6% of the bills were authored by Democrats. Even though they make up only 20% of the people in the legislature, they couldn't pass anything without who? Without Republicans. So Republicans have to sign on to every single bill that a Democrat passes in Oklahoma. Well, why are these passing? Is it because they're Democratic laws? No. they're laws that make sense, right? If we're looking at things and we're like, all right, this makes sense for everybody, I think we're going to be better. Your 80-20 rule, I like that idea of we're all coming together and 80% of the people can agree that this is what we need to do instead of just 51.
Right. If they were crafted right,
but they have to sit down and be willing to actually engage. When I went to the legislature and the teacher walkout in 2018, what I found was crazy was that at that time, I had been a Republican and I had just switched to the Democratic Party, but Republicans and Democrats weren't even allowed to talk to each other. And so everything that was discussed behind closed doors in caucus meetings. The Democrats
How does that
deciding,
make a bit of sense?
It does. So all of the decisions that were being made by just the one group. And so I ended up getting the Democrats. I was talking to them and they're like, hey, this is what we will agree to because they needed the Democrats' votes at that time to pass the teacher pay raise and the tax increase. And so they said, this is what we'll do. I said, okay, what do you want me to do? And they're like, go give it to Aaron Brobeck with Channel 9. It's our Channel 6 affiliate in Oklahoma City. And so I went down, I was sitting there, and John Echols, who's running for, I think, Attorney General now, but he was in the House. I was like, John, do you want to see what the Democrats are wanting to, what they will agree to? Yeah, sure. So I texted it to him, and that's what they passed. I had taken Jacob Rosecrans from Norman, gone and talked to Carol Bush. Hey, let's go down. Let's talk to Carol. What can we get done? Democrat, Republican, let's sit down. How can we help fix this? I'm a teacher. You guys are in the legislature. How do we get this fixed? And that's the kind of conversations we need to be having, is how do we actually do the thing that's going to help everybody, as opposed to let's push something down everybody's throats.
Because we're in power or we're not.
Because we're in power. And then in 2 years or 4 years, when people are like, oh, well, we don't like that, and we are going to like the other party, they're going to force their way on us. That's why I tell people, it's like, people in Brooklyn and California, they're different than people in Oklahoma, right? But there are some core things that we have in common. We don't like the government telling us what to do in our personal lives. Nobody does. You can't do this, right? We don't like that, or nobody likes to pay higher taxes, except for when I ask people, would you pay higher taxes to have a better education system in Oklahoma? People are like, actually, yeah, we wouldn't mind actually paying a little bit more taxes if we knew it was going to be invested in the right places. And so it's having conversations, tough conversations, to say, how do we bring down a $40 trillion deficit so that we're not leaving debt to our grandchildren or children, that's owned by China and owned by people around the world that are, not our friends. How do we make sure and keep Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security for the people that need it the most, children and the elderly, and at the same time not have those systems, blow up because or run out of money because we didn't fund them enough. Again, it's finding those tough solutions by having tough conversations. And, that's what I'm about. It's be reasonable, look at what the outcome's going to be. And, after the election in November, I decided to run because I saw, Monroe Nichols had won in Tulsa. More Tulsans had voted for Harris than for Biden. But at the same time, Monroe ran on outcomes. I saw Trump signs with Monroe Nichols signs, because people were like, all right, this guy's got a plan. Let's go in. Let's be reasonable. Let's try and fix things. And so I think that's what we have to focus on, is how do we actually improve things? Don't blame other people for why we're here. We need to know what our history is, but at the same time, let's go try and fix it. Do what's best for people so that we can all work to have a better place to live and support each other.
So wrapping this up, in a 10-second elevator speech, why would someone vote for you?
I think voting for John Croisant is voting for someone who's going to go to work for you, who's going to listen, who's going to work for outcomes, And most importantly, he's going to make sure that Congress does its job. If you want somebody that's not going to make excuses and that's just going to go do the work, then vote for me. And I think in the end, I'm going to represent Oklahomans, not the lobbyists, not the PACs, not the billionaires or whoever's out there that has all this money to give to politics. I'm going to represent the people that live in Oklahoma.
And you have a track record of doing that.
I've been pretty successful, and I've been blessed. I think having that Jinx background, I've won a few state championships coaching soccer. I just finished my 27th year coaching soccer, 16 years in the classroom. I'm got one of the top 3 insurance agencies in my company and in the country, and growth, and so. But it's all done because I believe in helping people. I believe if you give back, you're going to receive more than what you give. And so that's how I do my politics. That's how I do my business. That's how I coach. I just want to help people. And so I think if we had more politicians and more people throughout our community that just want to help and help solve problems, we're going to be a lot better off.
Help problems by listening to people and making a plan to have a specific outcome.
That's it. It's not hard.
Thanks for coming.
Hey, thank you, sir.
We are here to help you discover or develop your passions, how you can use them, and why you exist. How can we help you help others better?